Welcome back to the GrownKID Talk Show. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than the past videos I've been doing. The Can It Win Game of the Year series has been going over pretty well. People are commenting, dialogues are happening, and I just cannot wait to get my vote in for the VGAs. So before we get into today's video, I beat Code Vein after quite a while. I put the game down for a long time and I went back to it. I wanted to do a quick little mini review, and I normally do say it's quick, but it ended up taking a little while. I promise this time will be faster. And this isn't so much of a Can It Win video, it's me making a prediction almost, and it's not really that far off. I mean, Bandai Namco has not seemed like a true AAA company in a very long time. While I was super hyped for Scarlet Nexus when I saw the trailer, I was like, oh my gosh, this is finally that anime Dark Souls type of game I've been waiting for. I've been hit with some new information that I am almost positive that Scarlet Nexus will disappoint just like Code Vein. Not sure what's up with Bandai. This isn't a Bandai video. This is a Scarlet Nexus prediction, and I just don't see how this promising looking game at first can really exceed expectations.
It's the GrownKID Talk Show. Yo, it's the GrownKID Talk Show. Yo, GrownKID Talk Show. Yo, it's the GrownKID Talk Show.
Before I get into it real quick, why I'm talking about Code Vein is because Code Vein is going to be very similar to Scarlet Nexus, and I'm going to give you the reasons after I do the mini review to kind of prove my point and my own inner feelings as to what I really thought about Code Vein. IGN gave the game a 7. I'm going to cut out a lot of the context from what I normally do with a full-length review, which I haven't done in a while, but they are coming, so we'll just move faster. Code Vein takes some interesting chances with Souls-like mechanics and finds mixed results, but there's something worth sinking your teeth into here. Pun intended, they're kind of like vampires. A 7 out of 10 is an okay score. To me, that is mediocre, and mediocrity is not acceptable. Not acceptable when you're doing your schoolwork and you get a C. I get it. If you try your hardest and the best you can do is a C, then I'm okay with it. But you cannot convince me that Bandai Namco and Code Vein tried as hard as it could to create a Souls-like game in Code Vein. I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. It's a multi-million-dollar company, and you're telling me Code Vein was the best that they could do. One of my favorites, Metacritic, the Metascore was a 70 and the user score was a 7.8. This is one of the cases that the user score ends up being higher than the Metascore, and one of the cases where I actually agree with the Metascore a lot more than that user score. A 7.8 I feel is going to be a little too high. Also, I do believe that the Souls-like genre crowd definitely comes out in bulk for their genre of game very, very heavily. But we'll look at some reviews because, as you know, we do average both those scores together to get the final Metacritic score. Usually I pick out names I recognize more often, so if you watched a couple videos, you know we have featured Culture Vulture's Metacritic reviews before. They gave the game a 70. Flawed, but not a failure. Code Vein offers the same hardcore Souls-like action with less of a barrier of entry, making it a decent gateway into a growing genre. I'm going to tell Culture Vultures one thing here. The Souls-like genre isn't growing, it is full-blown here. If anything, the Souls-like genre needs to decrease in size, and if there's one thing I'm going to take away from this video, and I hope you do too, is I am tired of calling things Souls-like. I made the mistake in thinking that way with Code Vein, even though the game borrows so heavily from a typical Dark Souls game, so that comparison is valid. However, I want to erase that descriptive word of a Souls-like because I was mistaken when I thought Scarlet Nexus was going to be a Souls-like. It's just a bad descriptive word, and I need to be better. And you might notice something a little different here. I usually pick a good, a bad, and a middle review, and also pick a critic review from the Metacritic because they are separated, user and critic. This time I muddied the waters and just picked two average reviews because I do believe that these 7s are kind of what the game deserved. And Kindled, what a surprising name for a Souls-like review. And Kindled, kindle the fire, kindle the flames, Dark Souls reference. Code Vein is a fun game to play, but it will let you down in some aspects that it successfully hides from you. And they are not incorrect to say that the game will let you down, but not in the respects that it successfully hides from you, because I don't think the game hides really anything from you. These are Souls-like games, and the implication there is that there are supposed to be hidden mechanics and things there to find in a Souls-like. However, it is so trite and contrived and overused now that I found Code Vein utterly annoying and old style, mainly here with some of the side quests that you have to reload areas and see 7 or 8 long loading screens. Whenever you load out, load in to do a quest, load out to do the quest, load into a slow memory, load out to do a slow memory. And for those that played the game, you know what I'm talking about. Games Radar's review called Code Vein, a janky but strangely satisfying dungeon crawler by Austin Wood. It is extremely janky, and janky is being nice to this game in terms of its combat. It is very much like an old school PlayStation 2, early PlayStation 3 style game, as well as janky with the graphics. Holy shit, I was disappointed with these graphics. But let's keep on with this Code Vein. I say this all the time, Games Radar does a pros and cons list, and that's all we're going to focus on right now. The pros: gorgeous anime art, in-depth character customization, memorable story. I will give it that the character customization is very good. It looks pretty good, but your character will never look as good as it does in the character creator. I hate to admit that. The anime art is not as gorgeous as I would have hoped to be before I got the game, in all honesty. The story is only memorable in the fact that you will remember that there was vampires and blood codes. Other than that, you will be totally lost in the story, and you will be doubly as lost if you put the game down for a week or so and then pick it back up. The cons: it was too easy, recycled enemies, and clunky combat. Yes, the game is very easy, but this is the thing. Souls-likes become increasingly easier if you have AI allies as well as player-generated allies, which you can do in Code Vein. I like that. That's cool, because if you want the challenge, do those fights yourself. So the argument that it's too easy, to me, comes down to preference in most Souls-likes. Recycled enemies 100% of the time, and the clunky combat, it is just so clunky. That's an understatement. Surprisingly, Games Radar gives the game a 3 out of 5. Code Vein's lackluster combat is held up by great character customization, and its boring world is driven by a memorable story. It's clunky and uneven, but fun. Now, I've been saying this consistently, I don't understand grading games. I do not think that when you say that the world is boring, I would challenge the writer of this article to tell me what was memorable about the story, other than the fact that there was vampires in it. Like I always say, you would be remiss to not read Polygon and Kotaku reviews or any other reviews that you find interesting that don't have a numbered or lettered grade. So this is the Kotaku review. Code Vein is the chillest Dark Souls clone by Mike Fay. And while I want to keep this brief, I decided to pick out this one aspect from the review. It's those sorts of game mechanics that will keep me coming back once Code Vein goes live. I'm not particularly interested in the game's story, as I've already gotten my fill of hot anime people at the end of the world from Astral Chain on the Nintendo Switch. The post-apocalyptic world is pretty in many places, but plain in many others. This review was rather fair in its approach. It understands what Code Vein is trying to do. It's a beat 'em up, mash 'em up. This person had unfortunately played the game before the game came out. There was no other non-NPC players to play with in the world, so he was excited about playing with real people. And I get the games for that appeal, don't get me wrong, but is Code Vein and the time invested in it really worth it? I believe that the Kotaku review would fall in line with the other reviewers, and I think he would actually fall between a 70 and an 80, as I really do think that they hit on the idea of that customization. Everybody's going to talk about how great the customization is, and yes, it's good, but it doesn't make a game good. I'm confused. If everyone's saying the story's not good, which I consistently say the most important thing about a video game is the story, then I don't understand how the game could still be so highly graded. I don't know if it's Bandai Namco thing, but we're just going to give this a 75 and call that a day. One more review, and it is a new one. For some reason, the Polygon review I just really couldn't find, so we're going to use Destructoid by Josh Celenito, the Vampire Savior, a review of Code Vein. This was an interesting review, and as I've never read one from this site before, or by Josh, and it had a grade at the end, so we'll just cut to that. And they end up giving the game a 7.5, which is merely coincidence to the score I gave Kotaku for Code Vein. Good, solid, and definitely has an audience. There could be some hard to ignore faults, but the experience is fun. So the overall theme we've been getting here is that the game is fun. I mean, everything is fun to somebody, right? But where's the critical idea and thinking behind the review? And you're also stating that there are some hard to ignore faults. So there's some glaring problems with the game, but yet we still graded a 7.5, which is technically above average. So I'm just confused as to how we could give Code Vein such a high score, even though a 75 doesn't seem that high. Let's get to some quick maths. So our final scores are here, and I've done the math for you. The 70 from IGN, the 75 from Kotaku, the 75 from Destructoid, the 60 is our game's radar scale, a 3 out of 5 bumped up on a scale of 100 is a 60. The 74 you might be confused about, that is the 78 from the users and the 70 from Metacritic added together and divided by 2 to get the 74. So we're dividing by 5 because we have 5 reviews. So we'll add those all together. We get 354, we'll divide that by 5, and our final grade for Code Vein is a 70.8. That is an extremely high grade for this game. It is not that good and not all that fun once you realize you don't understand what you're doing anything for because the story is just overly convoluted. But on this channel, we're actually going to pump that up to a 71 because a 0.8 is higher than 0.5 and we round. Now, let's talk about why this is important for Scarlet Nexus. So now for the heart of the video. Scarlet Nexus, what is it and what it's about? Scarlet Nexus is an upcoming JRPG published and developed by Bandai Namco. Scarlet Nexus introduces a new and refreshing combat system to exterminate deranged mutants in a brain-punk futuristic reimagination of Japan. The game will be available on basically all consoles, and the release date is not yet confirmed, but I did some digging. We're looking at later in 2021. The interesting part here is the futuristic brain punk. I love the aesthetic and idea of this, and even in the trailer, I found moments to which I was literally in shock of the design. I loved it so much. The problem here, the idea that the combat is going to be refreshing is going to be incorrect. That combat looks exactly like Code Vein, and I have a couple of reasons as to why I get that impression. Kenjin Anabuki, I definitely want to get more and more familiar with the people making the games I'm talking about, and he is the director of Scarlet Nexus, has also worked on the Tales of series. Why this is important, the Tales of series is an occult type of JRPG. The in-game engine of the Tales of games has never really been top quality. It's always been the anime aspect of them. I myself have played a few. The last one I played to completion, I believe, was Vesperia, and I enjoyed it for what it was. I will never again feel the need to visit a Tales of game because it just doesn't do anything that well, and again, the combat is not that good. Now, I don't think it's necessarily Kenjin's fault here as to why I'm going to say that Scarlet Nexus will probably be a disappointment just like Code Vein. It's that the story of Scarlet Nexus seems so good. I think who we're going to end up placing a little bit more blame on is Kite Lizuka, because he's going to also be a producer on Scarlet Nexus and was most known for Code Vein. Code Vein's combat was not okay at all. It was super clunky, is from what we got from all of the reviews. So when we take that into account and now look at some of this trailer, we're going to see some very glaring similarities. While the world of Scarlet Nexus feels so interesting and alive, and I am a huge anime fan, I am just not a fan of these enemy types looking like Persona enemies. Honestly, these enemies look like they could have been ripped and taken right out of a Persona game, maybe even Persona 6, which I'm super excited for. Hopefully we get information at the Tokyo Game Show, but that's a Persona enemy and there's no convincing me otherwise. Our main character there looks a lot like Kirito, if you know the reference there. Alright, so we have to talk about the combat and the world itself. From the gameplay reveal, I really felt the boxy nature that I always feel comes with certain AA titled JRPG games. There are extremely boxy, and even though everything feels beautiful, nothing necessarily feels alive and next gen about Scarlet Nexus. The other thing is this combat is obviously very similar to Code Vein's. You can tell because the same people are working on the game. Now, one thing in Code Vein is that the abilities often detracted you from the actual combat, and I feel like the same thing is going to happen in Scarlet Nexus. My other big problem is that the side missions, I did some digging as well, and that the side missions are going to be there, except they're going to be in the vein, no pun intended, or pun intended, of a Code Vein. They're just kind of there to be there. I assume we're also going to have that reloading of stages that you do see in Tales of games as well. I find that very antiquated and just not next gen. I don't know what feels next gen about Scarlet Nexus other than some of the anime look to it. It does look good, but none of the graphics scream, oh my god, because there are animes that look better than this and there are video games that look better than this. And I do feel that the story is the most important part in a video game. Let's not forget that Code Vein's story was secondary, like we heard in all of the reviews, and it was very convoluted. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a digestible story and therefore more interesting, because if the combat is clunky, then I think we have a recipe for disaster with Scarlet Nexus. It sounds like I'm going to be ragging on yet another game that hasn't come out yet, because if you haven't seen me call out Assassin's Creed Valhalla as probably being the worst game, not probably, it will be the worst game in Assassin's Creed franchise history. And I'm not talking about the sales numbers or whatever. I'm talking about for Assassin's Creed fans, it's going to be the shittiest one. Scarlet Nexus, again, just looks like a reskinned Code Vein. I don't know what's up with Bandai Namco. I just think Scarlet Nexus will disappoint just like Code Vein. I'm the GrownKID. I know it was a long video. I know I rambled a little bit, maybe even ranted, but I'll catch you back in another video.
Yo, it's the GrownKID Talk Show.